I'm back. Excited to get this Q&A thing going again. Thank you guys for such really good questions. It was honestly pretty hard to choose which one to answer today, but I noticed a particular question that I see every once in a while, over and over again. And actually, two people asked it in the comments here, so I figured I might as well address it. So the general question is, how do you apply Math Academy principles to another topic? Like, how do you learn some other domain, leveraging the Math Academy way as much as possible, but where there's not all this knowledge graph infrastructure, spaced repetition system just like built into a service for you? Like you're roughing it out in the wild. What do? You got to get from point A to point B, but you don't have a car. How you're going to hack your way through this jungle of knowledge, of skills to acquire as efficiently as possible? And in particular, how do you do this in an incremental fashion, one step at a time, where it doesn't depend on you having existing knowledge of the domain, and it doesn't depend on you being a genius. All it depends on is that you're willing to work hard and also work smart, like efficiently, like not screwing around, not wasting time. Like you came here to learn the thing, and that's what you're focused on. And you're going to put a full ass effort into it, and you're going to show up consistently. What are you going to do? How are you going to learn the thing? What's your game plan? What's your approach? Now, there's like a million questions you can ask about this. Like, do you already need to know a subject to break it down like that effectively? Do you have to make your own knowledge graph? Do you have to do a spaced repetition plugin? And I think the easiest way to actually answer all of these is just to give some concrete examples of personal experiences that I've had successfully mapping the Math Academy approach over to other things that I've wanted to learn. Like, instead of trying to answer a bunch of abstract questions, let's just take a trip to the zoo. And from that zoo of examples, you can extract a lot of these general principles. And in particular, I'm going to focus on some domains where it's really not obvious, or at least it wasn't obvious to me how you go about learning it. So we're not going to talk about math. We're not going to talk about anything quantitative, because that's kind of the canonical example where I talk about all these learning techniques. You guys already know about that. And we're not going to talk about athletics, because that's kind of the canonical analogy I make, because these things are just so much more obvious in athletics. I mean, you want to lift weights, you want to get strong, like start with a weight that you can lift and put more weight on the bar. You want to learn a bunch of cool calisthenics moves, well, like find some good progressions, start at your level, work your way up. Like, people have a general idea of that. Now we're going to focus on two tricky cases that I've encountered in the past year. One is learning biology, and the other one is learning a musical artist. And to frame the goal, my end goal in my pursuits of learning these things was to be able to connect better with people that I know and love. And I always find that you can connect a lot more deeply with somebody if you can talk coherently, have an interesting conversation about some area of passion in their life. And the main bottleneck to having an interesting conversation with somebody else about their area of interest is that you probably don't know shit about it. And if you try to talk about it, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. So you just end up asking these really basic questions, which, I mean, it can be kind of enjoyable conversation, but it gets old really fast. I mean, when you have a good conversation with somebody, there's a sort of uniqueness to the conversation. You're not asking or answering a bunch of questions that are really easy to Google or just learn about on an LLM. You're beyond that point. Both parties have serious foundational knowledge. And because of that, you don't have to spend time going back and forth about really basic stuff. You're closer to the edge of human knowledge about this stuff. And that's where it gets really interesting. So that was my goal. How do I spin up on base foundational knowledge to have really interesting conversations with people that I know and love about their passions that I started out really not knowing much about? And without further ado, let's just jump into the first one, biology. So last fall, I actually started learning biology. My wife's doing a PhD, and beyond high school biology classes, I don't really know a whole lot about the subject. And I always made an effort to talk with her about it, but it always felt like there was just a ceiling on how interesting, how deep our conversations could go without me just like stumbling over some really basic stuff. Like gene expression, like what even is a gene? What does it mean to like turn some genes on, some genes off? And don't get me wrong, I mean, I know what a gene is at a high level. Like, yeah, genes are what make people different from one another. Like turning it off or on means you're basically enabling or disabling certain characteristics of an organism. But that high level, like super simplistic surface level understanding, just it's not enough to have a really interesting conversation with somebody who's an expert and really cares about this stuff. Like I wanted to really understand this down to the level of what's happening in the cell, DNA. And if you asked me before I went down this biology studying rabbit hole, I just couldn't tell you like anything. I mean, DNA is in the nucleus, right? I knew that, but like, how does it like get outside? What components of the DNA are like genes? What converts genes into molecules that go place? I didn't know any of this shit. So I went down this rabbit hole wanting to really understand at a nuts and bolts level what's happening with the DNA, what's happening with the organelles inside the cell, what are all the knobs and levers that are getting pulled in the pipeline from having a jumble of DNA to governing the whole functioning of this organism. And the problem is I never pulled the trigger on this before because it was just too painful. Like the learning experience just sucked. I crack open a textbook and it's like, I don't know, like 1,000 words on a page, really long-winded. Just I start reading through it. I get to page 2 and realize it's talking about the nuances of something on page 1. And I forgot even what that thing does. And by that time, I'm just skimming. And it's just so boring. My eyes are glazed over. There's hundreds of pages to go. I'm just like spinning my wheels, not really getting anywhere. And it sucks spinning your wheels and not really getting anywhere. It's just not fun. I like coming away actually being able to do things and talk about things that I wasn't able to before. Like that is like measurable, demonstrable learning. You need to be able to do things that you weren't able to do before you started learning the thing. And that's not happening, you're not learning. And if you're not learning, like what are you even doing? You're just wasting your time spinning wheels. So that's what I was trying to avoid. And I know what you do is you read the chapter, you do the problems at the end of the chapter or whatever, but it's just these cycles, these feedback loops taking way too long. And there's just too much friction. And if I'm going to pull the trigger on this, I need much more bang per buck, much more learning per unit time that I spend in this thing. If I'm actually going to do it and not just fall off the wagon on day one. So my first step was poking around for other resources just to see if there's is there a Math Academy sort of style thing that exists for biology. And I did get some recommendations and I checked out all the recommendations. But what I was finding is so many of these recommendations were like basically the same as like 3 blue, 1 brown, but for biology. So you like explore some interesting questions, see some interesting visuals, some animations. Like that's just cool. That can be fun. The problem is it's still kind of passive. Like I want to learn this shit cold. And, like, if I wanted to go get rock solid on doing some basketball moves or whatever, I'm not going to do that by just watching highlight videos on YouTube. I mean, they can be fun to watch. They can be inspiring. They can be motivating. But ultimately, you're a spectator. And if you want to seriously elevate your game in anything, not just sports, not just math, like literally anything, you can't come at it with spectator mentality. You got to be doing exercises, lots of exercises. Like most of the time that you spend in your learning session should be doing exercises. And yeah, you need to consume information to know what exercises to do and how to do them. But if you're trying to maximize efficiency, get the most bang for your buck, every piece of information that you consume should be consumed with the purpose of enabling you to produce. That's how you get stuff to stick in your head, by practicing pulling it out of your head. So what I ended up doing with biology is I was like, all right, not going to go down the textbook path, and I'm not just going to spend my time watching videos. I'm going to use an LLM to give me bite-sized pieces of information that enables me to do exercises based on that information. And I know it's not going to be as good as a carefully curated curriculum. I know the LLM is going to forget stuff. I know the spaced repetition isn't going to be amazing. I know it's simultaneously not going to be fully comprehensive, but maybe I can get some halfway decent, quick learning loop going where it delivers a bite-sized piece of information, has me do a bite-sized piece of work, wrestling with that information and retrieving it from my head so I actually retain it and make sure I actually get things right so that I know I'm actually understanding this information and not just glossing over it at surface level while misunderstanding a lot of details about it. And so basically what I did was I just chucked the Math Academy way into the LLM, just a straight up PDF. I didn't even try to, I know you're supposed to like summarize these things, take it through a pipeline of consolidating the information so you don't like blow up the context window. But remember what we're dealing with. I'm in this situation because I don't have a whole lot of time. I just want to get on with things and just have the LLM ingest some base amount of information that would kind of orient it in the right direction. And it actually worked decently well. When we started off with some diagnostic questions, it got a halfway decent sense of what I knew. I mean, again, this is nothing near a precision system, but it's better than a textbook. And not great, but it's just good enough to remove enough friction to just keep me going with it. And it took a lot of correcting its actions, like no, don't give me like 1,000 words to read and then 10 questions afterward. Don't even give me big paragraph, just really simple, bite-sized, short snippet of information, and then just ask me like 2 or 3 questions based on that information. And don't make them like open-ended questions, like write me an essay on blah, blah, blah. Just make them basic questions to check that I understood what I read and force me to pull that understanding out of my head so I can actually start to like chunk it up in long-term memory and use it fluently as I layer more information on top of it. And another thing that I had to like very explicitly fine tune was that this is not about shaping the learning experience around my curiosity. I mean, I want to learn this stuff, but I don't have a million burning questions. And if I came up with a bunch, it'd just be a waste of time because all these questions are going to be made trivial by the foundational knowledge that I'm going to acquire. And all I'm going to do is push the LLM to take me down some rabbit hole. And going down that rabbit hole, I'm going to miss out on all the good stuff, like all that spaced review and interleaving. I mean, for Christ's sakes, I'm always telling people to go through the question bank breadth first, not depth first. So that's something I had to very explicitly instruct the LLM to do. But after some initial fine tuning, I actually got to a point where I got these halfway decent, quick learning cycles, deliberate practice cycles, and I would do like half an hour a day, and I could feel that it was really cognitively taxing, but in a good way. It really felt like a cognitive workout session. I would do like 20 exercises in a 30-minute session, and it includes the bite-sized pieces of information interspersed. And all these exercises and bite-sized pieces of information would be building on each other, and I came out learning a lot more than I'd ever did with any other resource. And as a result, I had a lot of really interesting biology conversations with my wife. She was pretty impressed. I mean, from her point of view, it was like each week somebody just injected a truckload of knowledge into my brain each week, like Matrix style. Like it just got uploaded. Now it's there, and now we can talk. And now I can use all of it in our conversations. It's like she didn't have to remind me of stuff and re-explain stuff to me. It's like, no, I got this. Let's go play some intellectual basketball. Show me some cool moves. I know how to dribble. I know how to shoot. And I'm going to continue improving at this stuff. But I'm at a point where we can actually talk strategy. And I can ask some interesting questions that aren't made trivial by foundational knowledge. So overall, a success. Got me over the hump. Though I should say, if anyone's out there building a really serious biology training arena, is really good, then I would absolutely pay for a speed up from that. Because this LLM stuff, I mean, it was better than a textbook, okay? It was better than watching videos. But man, it was still pretty rough. Like, however much additional efficiency this LLM setup captured over, the standard textbooks and videos, there's still a way, way bigger efficiency gain on the table. If a subject matter expert actually curates content, makes a really good fine-grained knowledge graph, a precise diagnostic and review mechanism, timed quizzes to really build that automaticity, all this stuff is like actually hard-coded. So it's just there, problem solved. You don't have to worry about keeping the LLM on the rails because it's always drifting off. If you're not continually aligning it, or you don't even know how to detect that it's drifting off, then your learning experience will just get eaten alive by the AI slop. And I guess that was kind of the overall conclusion of this LLM-based learning experience that I set up, where it's like you really need to be an experienced driver behind the wheel. The secret sauce to this is just that you really have to be an expert on what efficient learning is, what it looks like. You need to be able to detect when things are starting to drift off course, go a little haywire, and nudge and recalibrate to keep the experience on the rails, to keep you in that active learning loop. If you don't really know what efficient learning looks like, or if you're somebody who will drift off the moment somebody stops holding you accountable for learning, things will go completely off the rails because you really have to be the coach or tutor or whatever to the LLM about what efficient learning is so that it can deliver that to you. So if you want to learn a subject where there's not a really good adaptive learning system, but you're not a super nerd on maximizing learning efficiency, I don't know how this solution would work out. But if you are a super nerd on maximizing learning efficiency, then yeah, you can kind of roll your own learning experience and have it be more effective than typical textbooks and videos. And at least one person other than me has managed to pull this off. Raphael Travis actually did a similar sort of thing to improve his painting skills. And yeah, I mean, I'm no painter, but that looks like serious progress to me. And he went into great detail about how he made this happen. And he shared some chat logs. And his end result was pretty awesome. He said that in his painting group, one of the pro-level artists was amazed by how much progress he had made in just a couple months. And these are not just beginner gains. This is like after beginner gains. He got stuck in a plateau, and this is what broke him out of the plateau. So yeah, if you want to do your homework, learning about learning efficiency, and then rolling your own learning experience in an LLM, you can really come a long way with it, even though there's still going to be a lot of efficiency left on the table. If you are skilled enough at designing efficient learning experiences, then you can turn this into a significant speed up over your typical textbook or video lecture series on YouTube. Okay, so that's one approach. Worked for me for biology, worked for Raphael for painting, and I think is a decent DIY technique for a lot of hierarchical domains. But what about less hierarchical domains? I just recently started writing about this here and there, but I actually went on a second learning expedition to spin up on musical artists that my sister-in-law's into. And in terms of end goals, it's basically the same situation as biology. There's something that I don't know shit about, but there's somebody important in my life who's really passionate about it, and there's the opportunity for us to connect over it. But that's only really going to happen if I actually know things when we talk about it. And it's also similar in that I don't have a ton of intrinsic interest in the domain. Like if these people weren't in my life, then I probably wouldn't bother with learning. So all these strategies that are pretty inefficient, but you might be able to make it work if you put in enough volume and enough just thinking about it on your own throughout the day based on just consuming information. That's not going to work for me. Like I got max 30 minutes a day, and I got to make that count. What am I going to do? How am I going to spin up on these artists, their songs, to the point where I can actually make a meaningful contribution to conversations about it? And now the one really interesting thing about this domain, as opposed to biology, is that the knowledge graph, like if you were to make a knowledge graph for it, it would be very, very, very wide, like way wider than biology, which is already way wider than math. So now we're getting into the domain of much less hierarchical knowledge structures. Now, that's not to say that it's unhierarchical, because there are levels of hierarchy to it. Like, I mean, for instance, like know the lyrics to a song, and really understand the meaning of the song, understand how that fits into the album as a whole, understand how that album fits into the artist's journey as a whole. But what I've realized is that this domain of spinning up on an artist's music looks a lot more like language learning than math learning. There's just a lot more primitives that you have to have rock solid in memory before you're able to keep building on top of them and connecting the dots and all that stuff. So what I've done so far is I've listened through some albums while working on other stuff, just so that when I look at the lyrics, I can be like, oh yeah, I've heard that song before. And also so that I can prioritize what songs I wanted to study first. There's some that I like more than others. And again, this is a relatively flat knowledge domain. So that means there's more room to leverage, even like an inkling of intrinsic interest. Like you have more choice in the matter of what path you take through the knowledge domain. Whereas in domains that are like relentlessly hierarchical, that hierarchy really constrains the efficient paths that can be taken through that knowledge domain. So, okay, listen to a bunch of songs. I got some songs I like more than others. And, actually, even before I dove into individual songs, I decided to put down a bunch of memory anchors, like throughout the whole space. I wrote down a bunch of lyrics that I like or were relatable in some way, or just that I had some kind of connection with. And I put them in a spreadsheet, and I just did spaced repetition with them. And I mean, I know loading them up into an actual spaced repetition system would increase the efficiency of the spaced repetition. But I just wanted it in a flexible format because I didn't know exactly what my cues were going to be. And it turned out the cues, I actually was changing the cues over time. I started out just like shrinking the spreadsheet window so that I could only see the first like 2 or 3 words of a line. And then I would try to predict the rest of the line. Eventually I got really good at that. And then I added a new column where I wrote down a couple words describing my connection to that line of lyrics, and then that would be my cue. And I'd have to recall the whole line without seeing any part of it. And so I did that for a while, and I got to the point where I was actually able to make a lot of lyric references in conversation. Then I got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm ready for the next level up. We're not just gonna remember lines of lyrics in isolation. We're gonna learn the whole song. We're gonna fill in the connective tissue between these lines of lyrics. So that way it's no longer just about my relationship with those lines, but I can actually start to better understand the artist's relationship with those lines of lyrics in the context of their overall song, which is actually something that I tried before putting down these individual lyric anchors. But it was just like before I put down the lyric anchors, it was just too hard. So the lyric anchors were actually something that helped scaffold me up to recalling entire songs, which is of course another benefit of the breadth first approach, where you're going down multiple parallel learning tracks and you get really solid on your primitives, and then it's just so much easier to connect them together as you climb to higher and higher levels of cognitive scale. And I kind of visualize it like this. It's like you're building a brick house or something. You want to get a full layer of bricks down before you try to start building more layers on top. I mean, like, it's a lot harder to start like just put on one brick and the next brick right on top of it, and then right on top of it, right on top of it. Like you're just asking for things to go wrong. Like, I mean, I'm no bricklayer, but it sounds like building the bricks tower by tower will just make things way harder than they have to be, way less efficient. And so that's kind of what the memory anchors were for me. It's like that first layer of bricks that supports the next layer of bricks, which is actually recalling songs as a whole. And so that's what I'm doing now, actually. So what I do to practice song recall is I'll look up the lyrics on my phone, but I'll cover the bottom half of the phone with a credit card or like a piece of paper or something. So that way I can't see the rest of the lyrics. And so I just incrementally try to predict the next line of lyrics, and then I scroll up. And I'm also recalling, and not just the lyric, but the song, the whole melody and backing music. I'm trying to play the next couple seconds of the song in my head without actually listening to it. And to measure my performance, I count how many lines I get incorrect or I can't remember how the song goes. And I actually just use a physical tally counter for that, and I just tally up the number of mistakes that I make as I go through the song. And so I put that in the spreadsheet, do some low grade spaced repetition based on the number of mistakes I made, and that's working out really well. Actually, I can see my number of mistakes going down. Like maybe the first time I did a song, it took 35 mistakes. And then a while later, tried again. It took maybe 25. Then a longer period of time later, tried again, down to like 18 mistakes or something. And so, and now I've reached the point, like once I'm down between like 10 and 20 mistakes, I really need to focus on the segment of the song where I'm making most of the mistakes. Oftentimes, I'm a lot quicker to learn the chorus than the verses, just because it's the same lyrics repeated over and over, and it's also catchier. And so when I sense that happen, then each time I go through the song, I only recall the chorus once, then I skip the other choruses, just to save time and focus on the areas where I'm actually making mistakes. And on the other occasion, sometimes it turns out that there's a song that I thought I knew well enough to start doing retrieval practice on, but I'm forgetting basically every single line, and I can't really remember how the song goes. And it's just too difficult. I'm not really getting a whole lot of mileage out of that form of practice. It's like I'm at the gym trying to lift the heaviest weight and just not giving it up the floor. And so if that happens, I need to scaffold into the full song prediction. So what I do is I'll actively listen to the song while constantly trying to predict the next few words. So I'm not just consuming the song. I'm actually having the song play, but I'm still doing this exercise where I'm trying to predict the next few seconds of the song. And then so that'll serve actually as pre-training. Right after that, I'll try to do it again, but without the song playing. So just like scrolling up the lyrics on my phone, the normal song recall testing exercise that I've set up. I'll track my performance on that. And then once I'm able to get to a decent level of performance pre-trained, then I'll level up to the usual spaced repetition. No pre-training, just trying to pull it from memory each time. And so far I found that's pretty efficient. Most songs, if I have to pre-train, I only have to do it once, because the next time I come back to it, I'm able to recall enough from memory to make the real deal retrieval an effective form of practice. I think there was only one song that I had to do 2 sessions of pre-trained retrieval before moving on to non-pre-trained. And, I guess pre-training is not the right word to use here. It's not like I'm doing it untrained. I mean, there's a lot of training leading up to this. It was just whether or not there was like an immediate review of the song before the real deal retrieval. And I'm always trying to avoid consuming information right before I'm recalling. The only time I'm doing that is when I just have no idea what the information is. I've completely forgotten. I tried my hardest to retrieve, but I need a reminder. It's like the spotter at the gym. You don't let the spotter lift the weight for you, because otherwise you're not lifting the weight. You're not going to get strong. But if you really cannot get the weight up, then yeah, like, okay, spotter, intervene. So what I'm trying to do is strike the perfect balance between the task not being too easy or too hard. It needs to be just at the edge of my abilities. And the moment it gets comfortable is the moment that I jump up to the next level. So what you're doing in this kind of training is you're trying to build these chunks in your long-term memory. Not just one layer of chunks on top of some isolated information, but also like chunks of those chunks, and then chunks of those chunks of those chunks. And it's basically like you build this brick wall of chunks high enough, you build it up into the sky, and that's how you can really engage in this deep conversation at a high level. Because everything you're talking about at a high level, if it's actually deep, that means it's built upon a tower of knowledge. And these towers of knowledge, they don't get built accidentally. Anyway, I hope this helps explain how to use the Math Academy way to learn other subjects as well, how to break things down into bite-sized components, get a lot of high-quality reps on those components, really tight feedback loop, compound, 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 lay down the first layer of bricks, lay down the next layer of bricks, keep building this thing up, building these chunks in long-term memory, building chunks on top of chunks, chunks of chunks of chunks, all the way until you're wielding these gigantic swaths of memory, of information, almost effortlessly. And things just pop into your head whenever they're needed. Just like Thor's hammer just flies into your hand. You're swinging this thing around and it's super massive, but it feels light as a feather. That's the experience you want. That is the experience of max efficiency learning. And that's all I got for today. But I'm going to get back to doing this Q&A regularly. Maybe like, I don't know, maybe like once every 2 weeks or so. I'll make a post inviting any requests, just like this time. Feel free to put follow-up questions on there. Or if I didn't get to your question this time, but it's a good one, please feel free to post it again next time. I really wish I could get to every single one of them. But in order for me to stay on the wagon with this, I got to really scope it down really quick. Just one question every couple of weeks. Not a big thing, not a big push. Something that I can stick with consistently into the future. Thanks for listening. See you next time.